Okay, right. So, hi, that's us just started recording now. So, my name's Marion McLaughlin. I'm here with my colleague Felicity. Hi, Felicity.
Yeah.
Um, we totally understand that this is massively unprecedented time, and as parents ourselves, we know everybody's kind of in the same boat. We're just as worried and um, flustered as everybody else, I think is fair to say. But we've put together some ideas about how we've been managing sort of schooling from home. So some of you know that I am a former primary school teacher. I think I basically want to say, if I had the choice between teaching 25 children that I'm not genetically related to and one that I am, a lot of the time it's far easier to deal with the 25. This is really hard. So we'll have a little look today. What you can expect from us is a lot of empathy because we're going through it too. Some ideas for how to manage the schoolwork at home. We're going to try and give you some reassurance and some opportunity to ask questions and hopefully give you some concrete tactics that you can maybe try and use from home. Felicity?
Yep. So we do want to emphasize that this is not homeschooling what you're doing, because, if you've maybe gone and Googled that term or something, you might be feeling particularly daunted right now. But this homeschooling is something that takes planning. People enter into it, through choice. This hasn't been a choice for anybody. Homeschooling involves all sorts of, meeting up, getting involved with groups, going and doing activities in your local area, going on day trips and things like that. And obviously, at the best of times, that would be difficult for people to do right now, trying to juggle their jobs and everything. But it's not even possible because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. It's not even something that we could do, even if we wanted to. So it's just not the same. And don't panic if you have looked up homeschooling at all and you think, wow, I don't think I can manage that, because that's not what anybody is expecting of you right now. This is just temporary. This is just schooling as best you can within your home, to the best of your abilities and as much as your child and you can manage. Anything to add, Marion?
No, I think that's fair enough. Yeah, absolutely agree with that. So I think the next point that we'd really wanted to make was it's a message from my son's own head teacher who I chatted with at the end of last week. And her main message to me was just do your best and don't get stressed. If you're getting overly stressed, you are not doing your best for your kid. So do whatever you can up until the point you can't do anymore and still be in a good place. And it's a message I've certainly been taking a lot to heart this week, and it's really helped so far. So yeah, doing your best and not getting stressed. If you take one thing away, right?
Yeah.
Flick.
And on a very similar note as well, we really, really want to emphasize that comparison is the thief of joy. Okay, you do not want to compare yourself to others. And Marion will go into more detail in the next slide. But yeah, you don't want to compare yourself to other people. Maybe look at how you were doing yesterday and learn from that and see if you can, take anything forward. That's fine, comparing yourself, you to you yesterday, see if you can make progress. But even that is a lot to expect right now. And so Marion will talk you through the ways you should not compare.
Yeah. So I think at the moment, one of the things that I've kind of noticed is that, you're able to look into other people's houses, you're seeing some of the work that your kid is doing compared with others. So the things that I always encourage every parent, whether they've got autistic kids or non-autistic kids, do not compare how much progress your child is making compared to others. Think about how they're getting on compared with the last maths lesson that they did or the last book that you were reading with them. And again, this was something that we said an awful lot whenever I was a teacher as well. Your kid is making the right progress for them in the speed that they're going at. There's no, this is where you should be in primary 2, this is where you should be in S1 or S2. That doesn't exist. It's where they're at. Don't compare how quickly they finish their work. When I was a teacher, if somebody finished something really fast, chances are there was a load of mistakes in it and that they needed to go back and rush and do things. So if they're taking their time and they're doing it well, even if it feels like it's taken a million years for you, that's fine. Do not compare your parenting either. Parenting autistic children and parenting non-autistic children, there's a lot of crossover, but there's a massive amount of differences. Don't compare your home. I know I've certainly seen the inside of some of my son's classmates' homes, and they are utterly beautiful and nothing like mine. A lot more organized. So don't worry about comparing your home with anybody else's. Your child's communication as well. This is something else that we've had parents talking to us about. Your child might communicate in different ways. They might communicate different things. Don't worry about that. They're, as long as they're communicating their needs and wants, and if they're not, then again, that's something that we can talk about with you. Their diet, because again, kids talk about the things that they're eating on this. Don't compare the diets. Are they getting enough to keep them healthy? That's fine. That's all you need to worry about. Or anything else. None of this actually means anything whenever you're homeschooling. Your kid making progress day to day, you all feeling secured and happy. That's all that really matters. Anything else, Flick, that I should have?
No. I think that's it all covered.
Grand. Right, let's see.
Okay. So managing a new routine. Now, obviously, getting into a routine can be really helpful, but actually doing it is also very difficult. So one of the ways that you can help is to involve your child in actually planning the routine, see if they do have a strong preference for doing things in a certain time, in a certain order, because quite often if you get your kid involved in something, there's a slightly higher chance that they will be enthusiastic about it. And don't worry, you might not get into a really good routine overnight, and that's absolutely fine. Nobody really expects you to. I mean, this first week at the moment is going to be a case of sort of seeing what works. And you might find that for some things you think, wow, why did I try that? That was a disaster. And that's absolutely fine. But you can try again tomorrow, learn from your mistakes. It's okay. And try sticking as close as you can to your regular routine. For instance, I know with my own kids, I know a lot of schools do like a daily mile. At my kids' school, they do it when they first arrive in the morning. And so in the last lockdown, we were going out for a little run first thing at 9 o'clock, because that was sticking to what they were used to, sticking to what they knew. And it also meant that it got over and done with that bit of exercise in the morning that we were maybe all a bit about. So that worked for us. It might not work for everyone, but yeah, seeing if you can maybe do things at roughly the same time, maybe get their lunch ready at the same time. If you can't because of work commitments and things, that's fine as well, but just seeing if you can sort of stick quite closely, and then build in breaks and snack times. And not just for the kids. You need a break, you need to eat, you need a cup of tea as well. You are allowed, and not just allowed, it is encouraged, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And don't panic if you do have to change the routine. Like I said, you might get it horrifically wrong. That's fine. We can't foresee every eventuality. And if something goes badly one day and you need to change it, if there's something that happens that means that you need to change the routine for that day or a bit more permanently, that's okay as well. We just have to kind of roll with it at the moment. Plan in some movement and exercise. Kids are going to get really bored sitting in one place. And I know that Marion, certainly when she was a teacher as well, didn't have the kids sitting at their desks, 100% of the time, just doing sums and things. I mean, you can educate your kids in all sorts of ways, and you can get them up and moving, you can get them out and about and things as well. And PE is a subject at school, they do need some exercise, and it will help them to actually focus when it does come to the more kind of academic stuff too. And use visual prompts only if they do not create additional anxiety, because they won't work for all children, and they won't work for all autistic children. But if that is something that you think will help for your kids, then using sort of visual prompts and things and visual timetables might be something that really helps as well. Anything to add to that, Marion?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. The only thing that we're kind of doing whenever it's sort of what job next is, I'm giving my kid plenty of options, saying like, here are the jobs that you've got today. Do you want to check them out? And then you can decide which one. And I think that's helping. Our routine is that he decides. And so far, touch wood, going all right. But if it needs to change, that's okay too. That's fine. Yeah. Anxiety at the moment is just going to be really quite high for a bunch of different people, and I'm including us parents in that as well, because I certainly know that whenever I found out that lockdown wasn't going to be for the schooling from home wasn't going to be for just 1 week, it was going to be at least 3, then I know that my anxiety shot up quite a bit at that. So these are some of the things that I sort of did as a teacher. We're helping with anxiety in the classroom as well, and some of the things that we try and do home is working with their learning style. Some kids work really beautifully whenever they have somebody sitting telling them things. Some kids really, really do well whenever they're learning things from YouTube videos. Some learn it really well from books. Some learn it really well by getting concrete materials out and doing things. So there's lots and lots of different ways that people can learn. So if you're not sure what their learning style is, feel free to sort of have a chat with the school, see if that helps. But just go with whatever it is. And that might mean changing the lesson, changing the way that you present the information from what school has asked for. That's okay. Are they meeting the intention of the lesson? That's fine. And yeah, as Flick said, not all learning is sitting down with a worksheet or a textbook. Now, some kids do really well with worksheets and textbooks, and some kids do really well without them. But when I was teaching, we would have entire days where nobody was sitting down and writing anything. We might have been working on massive big wall friezes. We would be going out and making a solar system with the kids as different planets, different distances away from each other. We'd be going out and doing things like the Daily Mile that Flick had mentioned as well. So lots and lots of learning is doing things in massively different ways. And support those learning differences too. We had some parents who had come to us sort of during and after the first lockdown, wondering if it's possible that their kids maybe had dysgraphia, dyslexia, dyscalculia. So dysgraphia is sort of having a difference between the ideas that they've got up in their head and what they're able to put down on paper. So they might have these fantastic, wonderful big stories, but then whenever you ask them to write it down, finding it really difficult, finding it difficult to grasp the pencil. With dyslexia, it could be sort of having issues with sort of reading, and with dyscalculia, with maths. I mean, for things like with dysgraphia, no reason at all why you can't do some scribing. With dyslexia, there are lots and lots of different ways of taking in the information, and certainly some of the resources that we've seen online, you can have a book that's read to you rather than you having to do the reading. The main thing is that they're getting the information. Yeah. One of the big things is model making mistakes. Now, as an autistic person, I really struggle very hard with making mistakes. And I know that many, 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 a huge number of autistic children are the same as well, because we make so many mistakes in so many areas of our lives, and being wrong is really, really difficult. So you might have your child sort of asking after every single math sum, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Give that reassurance, because they're needing that right now. That's fine, but also model what it's like to make a mistake. So if you do something, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, well, that's okay, because I've learned from it and this is good. When I was teaching, I would tell my kids that I was utterly delighted if they made a mistake, because if I gave them jobs every day and they didn't make any mistakes, exactly what was I teaching them? Absolutely nothing. So mistakes were how I knew that they were learning. It's how I was able to learn how they learned, and it's how I was able to plan for the next stages. Mistakes are good. Good things come from mistakes. And again, reassure this is not forever. So at the moment, we're being told that this is until February. Could be longer. We just don't know. But this will end. The last big lockdown ended. This one is going to end too. We've got vaccines and all sorts on the way now, so we can be a lot more positive. Even though it feels like we're living in Groundhog Day, we can still be more positive, and we can reassure them that this isn't going to last forever. One of the things that also works really well in my house and with a lot of the autistic kids that I'd worked with. How many jobs or questions left? So having a clear stopping point. So with this one, this is where math sheets can sometimes be a little bit handy, right? You got 20 questions, so we can count them down, we can sort of mark them off, we can check in any kind of way, then you can count how many's left, so then you know how many you've got to do. Same with spelling words, it's the same with any of them. Give them that clear stopping point. And sometimes the stopping point can be, do you know what? I'd like you to work on this picture for another 2 minutes, and then we're going to go off and we'll take a break. And if you've got more to finish, you can come back to it. But let them know that that job is not going to go on forever, that there will be a stopping point. During the first lockdown, one of the things that we'd heard from some of our colleagues in secondary schools was that some kids were getting really, really overwhelmed if they had 7, 8 jobs that all had to be handed in on Monday. So if you've got 7, 8 different secondary school teachers who are all expecting to have the same day, for some autistic kids that was really problematic, and they were just starting to mark some of them as being done. So that was really difficult. If it's going to work better for geography gets handed in on Monday, English gets handed in on Tuesday, maths gets handed in on Wednesday, then speak to the school about that. Does it absolutely all have to be done on the same day as everybody else, or is it possible to break them up? Now, some kids are going to really like having everything handed in on one day, and some kids are going to need a little bit more flexibility with that. So speak with your children, speak with the school, and if you need to have a little flexibility in when does a job get handed in, that's fine. Now, if you're in the city, then I think most schools are using Google Classroom, and they can change the date that it's due in instead. But hey, kids.
It's full?
It is, yeah. Knew we were going to get Zoom bombed. So speak to them about whether or not you need anything changed on a different day. They can change the date that it's due to be handed in. And that should be okay if you explain that. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Flick? Or do your kids want to Zoom bomb as well?
I think they're still downstairs. We're safe.
Okay. Yeah, anything else you wanted to add? Or
No, I think you covered all of that. Lovely.
And thank you. Right.
Okay, and I mean, connected to anxiety as well, co-regulation. So yeah, you might be finding that you're having a hard time sort of trying to keep your kid and yourself kind of regulated in terms of your emotions and your sort of sensory needs and things. And this is something that can be hard to do. And there is no magic wand here. So yeah, sometimes things will be difficult, but having said that, these things will certainly help in a lot of situations. So acknowledge the specific difficulty that your child is having. You know, you do actually want to specifically say, like, I understand that doing X is really hard, you know, whether it's I do understand that this math question is actually really tricky, isn't it? I do understand that this picture hasn't gone quite how you wanted it to, you know. I know it's really frustrating that we don't have quite the right shade of purple, you know. So acknowledge that they are having this, and sometimes it might seem trivial, but to them it's not. So you do need to acknowledge that, and then empathize with it, you know. Yeah, no, I do understand. It's really frustrating, isn't it? You know, yeah, you know what? I would be really annoyed by that. I might be feeling a bit sad if that was me, you know, and they understand then that you do appreciate how they're feeling, because it can be a bit rubbish when your feelings are just dismissed. Even if other people do think that they're trivial, it's still nice for them to acknowledge and empathize in that way. And then you sort of start to put in some self-soothing measures as well. So you're supporting their sensory needs, you're making sure that the environment around them is kind of appropriate. And we do have an environmental checklist as well, but I think we'll probably mention later on, and Callum will pop a link up as well for you. And so yeah, making sure that everything around them, that it's not too noisy, that, you know, the lights aren't too bright, or at the same time that they have enough light. I actually often cope with more light than a lot of other people. I annoy people I live with by turning on the lights in all the rooms, and they're like, "Black, it's daylight, you don't need the light on in here." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, there was a little corner over there that just wasn't quite lit up, so I felt like it was needed." So yeah, whatever it is in terms of the sensory stuff, and making sure that they have, like, oh, I've got myself here as well, I've got a good few, always got some fidget toys to hand if they might need it too. Model some deep breathing for them, because that can be really, really useful. Making sure that your in breaths are a bit shorter than the out breaths. The exhale should be just a bit longer as well. And that can be really effective. That's actually something that my dad used to do with me long before we realized that I was autistic at all. And that, yeah, probably he helped me avoid meltdowns or come round from meltdowns afterwards by helping me with deep breathing, even though neither of us really knew exactly what it was that was helping at the time. Again, movement break. We were saying before about getting up and getting active and having exercise and things. If you just sat in one place for too long, it does get really frustrating. And the big proprioceptive kind of movements as well. So those are the sorts of movements where you're pulling, or you're kind of pushing against something, or you're kind of, it's big sort of swaying, so that you're using like those muscles to kind of make big movements. So yeah, things like, even just like lifting yourself up out of your chair and back down, things like that can really help. If you have a fidget toy, which I did have one, but I actually think I've dropped it because I was literally fidgeting with it. You get the kind of stretchy kind of noodle type fidget toys as well, and that sort of movement as well. That's a big proprioceptive movement that can really help with regulating, as can deep pressure. Now, that doesn't work for everyone, and for some people that will be quite distressing. So it's the sort of thing that you need to make sure that this is a good versus a bad. But I know that my boys both really benefit from having weighted blankets on them. I know even my husband, to be honest, really appreciates having a big weighted blanket. Marion as well. I know that you get some nice sand toys that have a really good weight to them that you can just have sort of pop on your chest or have in your lap and things. I know that Marion's got a couple of those. So things like that can really help. Even a big kind of nice tight hug. Again, only if that works for the child. You're not going to be grabbing the child against the consent, giving them a hug when they're going, "No, mum, don't want a hug." But yeah, for some kids, that's just going to do a world of good. And as I said earlier as well, you cannot pour from an empty jar. So you need to make sure that you're regulated as well, that you're affording yourself all of this, that you're making sure that you're getting your sensory needs met and things, just as much as your child. Because yeah, you're not going to be able to help your kid if you're on your knees with exhaustion and overload, and so need to keep yourself in mind as well. Anything else to add to that one, Marion?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think as an autistic parent, I think sometimes it can be really difficult to make sure that your kid's sensory needs are being met and your sensory needs are being met, particularly if your kid's sensory need is to make lots of great big noises and your sensory need is to get away from great big noises. That can be really difficult sometimes, but your needs are important too. Yeah. But no, that was super. Thank you. And I think sort of leading on from that, and it's kind of similar to what we posted up on Facebook yesterday, is, if you're thinking of your child as behaving badly, it disposes you to think of punishment, whereas thinking of your child as struggling to handle something difficult encourages you to help them through distress. And I think this is something that we've seen quite a lot of parents really sort of benefiting from. I know that there are a lot of kids who are going to be having a lot of meltdowns with this right now. Whenever technology goes wrong, whenever they're not expecting to see their friends, whenever their job looks slightly different, whenever you don't have as much patience as their teacher does, there's going to be like a million things that might sort of lead to meltdowns. And I think especially whenever you're in such close quarters and we can't get out quite as much. And I think it's something that I'm really trying to bear in mind myself, and I know a lot of other parents that I know who are autistic are trying to think of this too, is that our kids aren't deliberately giving us a hard time. they are having a hard time, you know, as we posted up yesterday. And whenever they start getting really anxious and upset, yeah, that's sort of worth bearing in mind. Okay. Flick, anything you wanted to add to that? Or?
No, I think you covered all of that.
Grand.
Okay, and so introducing new work, always fun, right? So when you do have some new work to introduce to your kid, there are some sort of good points to consider here. Firstly, autistic children will often want to know why they have to do something. Not just children, to be honest. I need to know why I'm doing something before I see the point in doing it. Otherwise, you know, why would I bother? So you need to explain to them what the actual point of the exercise they're doing is. So, you know, it might be, right, okay, so we need to do some reading, don't we? Because if you keep practicing your reading, then you're going to get better at it. And you need reading when you're a grown up. You might need reading for doing your computer games. That's something that works well with my kids. Oh, but you know, you can message, well, not so much now that he's working from home, but it used to be, well, if you get good at typing, then you can message daddy at work sometimes, can't you? And that's really exciting. So if you can sort of find some motivation for them, also maybe just, you know, let them know exactly what it is that the teacher's looking for from a given task, because that can kind of help reduce some anxiety. And then when you do come to start going through it, Marion has the brilliant my job, our job, your job kind of technique that she used as a teacher that she'll go through with you now.
Yeah, so we actually used this in my house today. We were learning about right angles for the first time and wrong angles, clearly, because that's what comes up when we start learning about right angles. So the way that we started it off was I said, right, so we're doing this thing and, you know, here's the worksheet and all the rest of it. We went over the input from the teacher and it was very much right. So the first few questions are mine. I'm going to answer them. They're not your job. No, that's not your job at all. This is my job. So I'm going to answer these first couple. And then I sort of did that. And then after that, we did a couple together. So we worked as a team to answer a couple of questions. So we got to discuss it. And then after that, kiddo was able to sort of go off and do some of them as his job. So by that point, he felt just a little bit more secure, knew that I was there to help if it was needed. So he was a bit more able to tackle it. And because it wasn't straight away, this first question is yours, that he was having to handle it, it made it just that little bit easier. Yeah.
Okay. And then also try to make it interesting to them, especially if they're really struggling to kind of get into something. So, you know, like Pokemon maths, you know, let's make this about Pokemon rather than just making it about numbers, which is boring. Or I know in the first lockdown, my kids were encouraged to do some kind of sort of sciencey stuff, you know, estimating and measuring and things. And so one of them had a real interest in puffins at the time. So I was like, right, well, why don't we guess how big a puffin egg is? And we can draw how big we think it's going to be on this piece of paper. And then we can measure how big the egg that we've drawn on, you know, is. And then we can actually go and look up how big a real puffin egg is, and we can compare and we can measure and see how far out we were. And so, you know, it was just a way to make it that little bit more interesting for them, something that they actually wanted to do rather than just, you know, right, okay, we've got this circle, let's measure it, or, you know, which is a bit dry for a lot of kids. And then also listen to their ideas for future jobs as well, because sometimes they come up with some brilliant ideas. Kids can be really creative themselves. And that also kind of ties into us saying, you know, you're giving them a reason for doing the job in the first place. They need to know why. If they know why they're expected to do something, they might be able to come up with more creative ways in the future of reaching the same goal. So yeah, always discuss these things with them. And it is okay to do things a little bit differently. It is fine to meet the learning intentions in a different way. You know, right, what actually is the teacher looking for from this? You know, so this piece of, you know, they've been asked to draw something. Right, is the teacher actually looking for an accurate representation of an object, or is the teacher looking for them to try experimenting with color? Is the teacher looking for, you know, them putting together shapes? And can you do that with, you know, if they don't want to draw whatever picture they've been sent through, or whatever, you know, tree they've been told, well, could you maybe do it with one of their Lego figures instead? Could you maybe do it with, yeah, a Pokemon character instead? Could you find something that they would be a bit more interested to actually do? And as long as you've thought about what it is the teacher was looking at getting out of the piece of work that they were set, and you're doing the same, it doesn't matter if it's not the exact same worksheet that they're doing compared to their peers. As long as they're learning the same information at the end of the day, that's really all that actually matters. So it really is okay. And I'm sure Marion will very much agree with me there as an ex-primary school teacher.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was doing my nursery placement at university, I had this lovely idea of how we were going to do this big wall frieze on the lighthouse keeper's lunch. And I had this idea of how we were going to make the rocks at the bottom of it. And one of the little nursery girls who was 3 said, that's not how we're doing rocks, we're doing it this way. And do you know what? Her idea was better than mine. So at that point, I was properly schooled myself, and I think it was one of the best lessons that I took away from my teacher training. Kids have amazing ideas sometimes, and sometimes it's really beneficial to just go with it. Yeah. And we were the same during the last lockdown. I'm sure we will during this one as well. Just slightly different thing, same. That's fine. So I think that supporting sensory needs for anybody who's had any kind of appointment with us at the One Stop Shop, chances are we'll have brought up sensory needs, right, Flick? Yeah, because sensory needs are just so important. And even if you're in your own home, chances are that the sensory needs are much more likely to be met really relatively simply compared with in a classroom. But we know that if you've got siblings, if you've got people who are working from home and all sorts of things, then that might be a little bit trickier. So Callum has incredibly kindly put together a document that we're going to share out with everybody after, whenever we share the recording. We're going to send out a copy of the presentation, and we're also going to share a copy of this. It's like a sensory profile that you can record what different sensory preferences your kid has, what different sensory needs they've got, what sensory triggers they've got as well. And it's you can go through each sense. So whenever it comes to touch, for example, right now, in an incredibly professional way, I'm playing with a cuddly toy because I really like the touch. I like the feel, and that is very pleasing to me, and it's helping keep me focused. So that's absolutely fine. And I can focus better when I'm cuddling a porg. Go figure. And that's going to be the same for some kids too. So whenever it comes to the sense of touch, things like this, I find really calming. When I'm feeling anxious or a little bit frustrated, having something that's really rough on the palm of my hand helps an awful lot as well. So those are things that would go into my sensory profile. I really would put in the sounds that I like a lot, the sounds that I find tricky. So I find high-pitched noises really tricky, or really loud noises really tricky. But the music that I like that would help me to chill out, that could go into that too. It also has, and Callum, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what sensory overload is, and what it can look like whenever your child is experiencing sensory overload. So for me, experiencing sensory overload, it would probably be like hands over the ears, hands over the eyes, could be running out of the room, could be other distress. When are you likely to experience it? So when is your child most likely to experience sensory overload? What your child can do in that space, and what other people can do to help them as well. So having a proper big discussion about sensory preferences and sensory needs can be really useful whenever it comes to managing anxiety, whenever it comes to coping with all of the change. And if your child is able to, then you can discuss the sensory preferences and needs with them. But I mean, I know a lot of us, even whenever our kids were babies, we were able to sort of look at them and say, right, well, this really works for them and that really doesn't. So there's lots of different ways of communicating that kind of information. And I know this might seem a bit odd for us to put in, but as autistic adults, we've had a lot of experience of us sharing our sensory needs with other people and people not believing us. We've had a lot of experience of people saying, well, it doesn't bother the other autistic people that I know. Doesn't matter, bothers us, right? So that's fine. The thing about autistic people is we are all incredibly individual, sometimes even more so than non-autistic people, I think. So if they're telling you that something is a problem, if they're telling you that they're hearing the electricity in the walls, if they're telling you that they're hearing the neighbors having a quiet conversation, please do believe them, and check with them that the environment is okay. Is there anything that they would like to see changed? So we have actually made an environmental checklist for schools, which is on our website. I think there's somebody else who's got their mic on, so if we could just ask everybody to sort of pop themselves on mute just while we're recording, and then that way you won't come up on screen, just to warn you that that might happen. Okay. Yeah, our sensory checklist for schools is up on our website, and it's absolutely free to download. Anyone can use it. We know schools who have used it to help support the kids in their environment. And if it's going to be useful, you can use it for home as well. So just where it says schools, you could change it to home, to bedroom, to living room. Having fidget toys available. Flick, you've sort of mentioned them as well. While we've been doing this, I have a ring where the bits on the outside spin around that I've been doing whenever we've been getting our school workout. Got a little array of sensory toys, and that's all really helped. And stimming. So stimming, for anyone who doesn't know, is short for self-stimulatory behaviors. And stimming is one of the best bits about being autistic, actually. I love stimming. So stimming can be fidgeting this around, it's sitting stroking my cuddly toys. Stimming can be flapping your hands, it can be jumping up and down. It's any kind of repetitive movement. Yeah, and Felicity is pulling on her squidgy toy, which you can show them in a second as well. Stimming is something that for a long time people tried to suppress in autistic people, but it really is just like as natural to many of us as breathing is, and it really can help aid learning as well. So if you're allowed to do some stimming, that can be part of self-soothing, and it can help regulate. Sometimes stimming can help us to remember things. Sometimes stimming can help us cope with an environment that's not always 100% brilliant for us. So if your kid is flapping, if they're rocking backwards and forwards while they're doing their job, have at it. That's fine. As long as the stim isn't hurting themselves or others, I would just go with it. We did do a video about stimming as part of our Autism Acceptance Month last year that if anybody wants to see, we're happy to share that again. Flick, is there anything, do you want to show them your squidgy?
Yeah, so I found it. I found the stretchy noodle that I was mentioning before. So there it is. So yeah, that's a good one as well, because that's a proprioceptive movement too. So 2 for 1. Okay, and then also, yeah, so prioritizing mental health, both for you and for your kids, because I mean, what's the point in getting them through every single school assignment that they've been set if they're going to have a breakdown at the end of it? You know, our mental health is the most important thing. It really is more important than schooling. So if it's too much, call it quits for the day and start fresh the next day. That's fine. Oh, Marion, your screen share seems to have it's fine, I've got the slide here, but so yeah. And
sorry, Flick, for some reason on my computer it flicked away to my email, and I don't know why, so I just thought stop it, come right back. But as long as you guys didn't see the email, that's fine. Okay, we're good. Right,
we're all good. Okay, so yeah, it's okay. You know, losing half a day of schooling is really not a big deal if it means that everybody's going to be calmer for starting again tomorrow. You know, that's the best way to go about it. So yeah, don't persevere through meltdowns and shutdowns. Don't keep going if it's getting to that point. It's really not doing anybody any good. Um, Again, with the exercise, but also fresh air. I mean, these things can really help. Sort of going out, going for a walk. If you do have a garden, getting out, in the garden, it can really help to get some fresh air. If you're lucky enough to be somewhere where there are trees, I just love trees as well. Walking anywhere near trees always makes me feel much better. If you don't have much in the way of sort of outdoor space, then you can do exercises at home. There are loads and loads of sort of online classes and things at the moment for both kids and adults. There's a wealth of stuff out there, so you'll be able to find something, I think. And kids learn in loads of different ways, as I think we've already kind of said. But so playing, exploring, reading, gaming, chatting, drawing, all of these things are learning as well. Learning doesn't have to just look like sitting in front of a textbook. It doesn't mean sitting and doing an activity sheet. Kids learn through play. I mean, that's really all that they do in terms of sort of play group. And the first year that they're at school, they really do push now learning through play, because kids learn so much whilst they're playing. And yeah, you can do reading with them, you can read to them. Earlier today, with my own kids, we were supposed to be doing some book set, and I couldn't access the app, and we were all getting a bit tired, to be honest. It was getting towards the end of the sort of homeschooling type time. And so instead I got a book that we all really like, a chapter book, The Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark. Lovely book. And we each just took turns reading bits of it, and when I thought one of them was maybe just getting a bit tired or struggling, then I maybe stopped giving so many or I looked for the easy couple of words, and we just did it like that. And you know what, better that they did that and they got some reading in than I had tried to force some sort of book that we were just never going to cope, and it ended in meltdown and we didn't get any done at all. And then tomorrow it would have been a much bigger deal trying to even get them to consider reading because of the what had happened today. So that was fine. We all got something out of it, and that is perfectly acceptable. And plan time for whatever support's there, but also your mental health. So whatever it might be in terms of hobbies and special interests, in terms of sort of speaking to people, making sure that you can talk to people who support you, time to kind of sort of calm down, making sure that all your sensory needs are met. Just make sure that you do have time for it, because it really is important. And I would say it is more important than the sort of formal education, because your kids are being educated all the time. And the thing is, you are their main educator anyway. It's even when they are at school, they are learning so much more from you than you realize, sometimes more than you would wish when they repeat something and you go, oh, you were listening to that, were you? Excellent. Okay, I'll know that for next time. But yeah, honestly, they are learning from you anyway. So you just need to try and make sure that you're looking after yourself and looking after their mental health as well. Anything to add to that, Marion?
I was just thinking that at one point I taught a primary 7 class, and we did a Guitar Hero project, and it was probably one of the things that we got the most out of in all the time teaching. So for anyone who doesn't know, Guitar Hero is a video game where you get controllers that are shaped like instruments, and you play music, and you can sing, and there was a drum kit and guitars and all the rest of it. It was fantastic. We did loads and loads and loads and loads of work all related to that. The kids set up their own little bands, they recorded some music, they designed their own album covers, all sorts of things. There was music journalism in there. It's just amazing the different kind of ways that you can get that learning out there. And that's kind of making me miss teaching just a little bit, actually. But in the first lockdown, we organised a family band. So we've got a drum kit, we've got guitar. None of us are any good at playing any instruments at all. But we got a family band. We wrote a song. We drew posters for our band and everything. It was brilliant. So much learning, and none of it was kind of what you would have considered formal. Yeah. But I'll stop reliving my days as a teacher. Right. And this is something that we both know, that sometimes talking with schools about your experiences during lockdown can be really difficult. And I think it's fair to say that while some schools do a brilliant job of understanding autism and understanding their autistic children, some schools they do find it a little bit harder. So what we would suggest is, if you're having an issue, let the school know as soon as possible. And again, as an autistic person, if I have a problem with something, I have two choices. I can either tackle the problem and try and get it sorted, or I can try and forget about it, which I will fail miserably at, and then it will keep me awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. So those are my two choices. If there's a problem that you want to talk about, it really is good for your own mental health sometimes to get it dealt with quite quickly, and really decide what you think is essential and what is desirable. So does your child have to do 5 jobs a day, or is that essential, or is that just desirable? Are 3 of those jobs essential? So work out with them what they really, really want to see, and then what else is a bonus. So that's fine, because not everything is going to be essential. That's just how it is. Some of these jobs are going to be for keeping kids busy while mum and dad are working. That's some of the things that they're going to be sending out. If praise can be tolerated, please try and encourage your school to praise the effort that your kids are putting in and not just their achievements. Now, some of our kids are going to be absolute high flyers and top of their class and doing absolutely brilliantly. And some of our kids are going to be keeping their heads above water, and some of them are going to really struggle to even do that. But if your child is trying, that is the bit that really, really needs to get praised as well, if the child can tolerate praise. Now, some autistic people really love praise, and some autistic people really, really struggle with it. I like praise to a certain extent, but you give me too much and I am going to melt down. That's pretty much how it works, or have a shutdown, or just not be able to communicate. So one of the things that I really do like about my son's school is that if he's worked really hard on something, it is the hard work that gets valued, not always the end product. If the end product is great, fine. If he's worked really hard on something, that always gets praised. And yet, be realistic about your own abilities. As I said earlier, I am a fully qualified primary school teacher. I've taught everything from nursery to primary 7. And I very, very naively thought that this was going to put me in a relatively good situation, and it really was very naive. So sure, I know lots of different ways to introduce work and all the rest of it, but it is really, really hard, especially if you've not been a qualified teacher. And it's hard when you've spent a few years out of education, and it's difficult whenever you're trying to do something with your kids that's just not within their regular experience of being with you. Let schools know what is working well. And this is something that I certainly did sort of after the first lockdown, as you know, speak to my kids' school. This was brilliant. This worked great. This is what we can do. And they've really taken it on, and that's helped a lot in school. And one of the other things that we've sort of been speaking about as a staff, and something that some of us have noticed ourselves, big online meetings where you've got like the whole school or the entire class can be really overwhelming. So it's okay to ask for a one-to-one with the teacher instead. And it's also okay to ask for small group work. So I think in the next couple of weeks, my kid is getting to do some little group work with a couple of his favorite friends. You know, they're all going to be getting together and able to do something. And that is going to be a lot more achievable for some autistic kids than the great big meetings. Yeah. Flick, anything you wanted to?
Sorry, I lost my cursor to unmute myself. No, I think you covered all of that really well.
Yeah.
And this one's just a You might have even seen this sort of going around as a meme on social media. So this is about equality versus equity, and this is to do with talking with schools in case you're kind of worried that, you know, oh, but I'm asking for special treatment, or, you know, oh, this means my child won't be treated like all the other kids, and, you know, or if the school does sort of try to say, you know, oh no, well, the other children don't need that. So in the first panel we've got there, it's assumed that everyone's going to benefit from the same supports. They're all being treated equally. So they've all been given, you know, a box to stand on to see over the fence there. But the tallest guy never needed a box to see over the fence in the first place. And that still means that, you know, the shortest person there isn't able to see anything. So then you've got the second image where they're all given different supports to make it possible for them to have equal access. So rather than being treated equally, you know, they are being given equal access to see the game. And so they are being treated equitably rather than equally. And that's the difference there. In the third image, you know, all of them can see the game without any supports or accommodations, because what was causing the inequity in the first place was actually addressed, and the systemic barrier has been removed. So, you know, this is just to show that if you do sort of think, oh, but, you know, Pokemon maths, it's all very well saying that, but I don't know if my school's going to be okay with that, because, you know, they're going to want my kid to be doing what all the other kids are doing. Well, if your kid has different support needs to the other kids, then that's absolutely fine. Your kid is still actually being given the same opportunity to access education as the other kids are being given, even if the way it's being presented is different. Anything to add to that, Marion?
No, I think that was, yeah, that was absolutely fine. Yeah, I think that a lot of us sometimes forget that our kids are legally entitled to these different kinds of supports. This is enshrined in the Equality Act. So you're not asking for special treatment, you're not asking for different treatment, you're just asking for the treatment that they are actually legally entitled to. And yeah, sometimes some of the other kids might get a little bit annoyed that somebody's getting something different, but that's up to the school then to say, but everybody needs what they, everybody should have access to what they need to thrive. And that's going to look different for everybody. Yeah. I think our last plug, our last slide is a shameless plug for our webinar that we're doing in 2 nights' time on Thursday evening. Self-care is not selfish. We will do the best for our kids if we're looking after ourselves. And this is something that I think, Felicity, you and I have been trying to do quite a lot, is making sure that we're looked after, so then we can then look after our kids. And I think for me as a parent, one of the big motivations that I have for making sure that I'm looked after is knowing that I'm going to do a better job as a mum if I'm got enough spoons to be able to do that. So for anybody who hasn't already signed up, we do have our self-care webinar on Thursday. So if you're looking for some ideas on how to make sure that you're looked after, you know, if you can't manage along, if you sign up, you'll still get the link out later on.